This module is Item Response Theory. It's Module 6. IRT as a modern testing method. This is an example of an approach towards educational research, and I'm just going to walk through some of the big concepts in IRT to help with our work around understanding test design and test validation. So, item response theory is an analytical approach, and it is considered a methodology. It's a theoretically developed way of approaching data to answer specific kinds of research questions. IRT is used in all kinds of applications. We see it in survey research, we see it in high-stakes testing, we see it in judgment validations, and what it allows us to do is look at responses of data and analyze them so that we know our data is working the way that we think or hypothesize it works. And what I mean by responses of data is simply coding of data that matches people's responses to items on a test or items on a survey. So we see IRT being used by research psychologists, by educational researchers, assessment developers, health researchers, and many other kinds of social scientists. It's really used to estimate latent traits and abilities, and we use it to estimate those latent traits and abilities based on the responses that we see. It's important to know that these latent traits aren't really known. They're theoretical. They exist in theory. So if you could imagine that things like children's reading scores or abilities to read are really theoretically known, and you need some sort of way to go out and quantify them, that's an example of how we might think of IRT estimating a latent trait or a latent construct. And we can also go and talk about it in lots of other ways too. We can talk about IRT being used to measure things like antisocial behaviors or antisocial personalities or risk-taking behaviors or many other kinds of knowledge, skills, abilities, dispositions, those kinds of things. It's important to keep in mind that IRT is really different than classic test theory, and I wish I could go much more in depth into the difference of IRT and classic test theory, but I can't for this course because it's really outside of the limits of what we're trying to talk about. But you should know that there are two pervasive paradigms in test design. The first, of course, one that we had was classic models of testing, where we look at how tests work across populations. This is where, you would know someone was in the 10th percentile on an IQ test or the 50th percentile or whatever the case may be. That is very different than how we approach item response theory, where we're actually looking at measures and understanding how people respond to items and how those responses model some sort of latent theoretical trait.